The NBA draft wrapped up, we did the winners and losers, and with free agency coming to a close, it's again time to look at the biggest winners and losers. But if you guys like my content, make sure you like and subscribe. Let's try to get 13 likes on today's video, and let's hop into it. Now, I think we've got to start this off with the biggest winners of the offseason, in my opinion, the Los Angeles Lakers. I truly think this is one of the most impressive off seasons we've ever seen from a team. The Lakers are fresh off an NBA title, and it didn't look like we were going to see a much different roster with the strength of this free agency class and the Lakers' salary cap limitations. I really didn't think it was possible for them to actually get better, but somehow they did it. Now, this video is kind of off-season / free agency because they both affect each other. So the first of the Lakers' moves was trading away Danny Green, who had a pretty disappointing year following a pretty nice payday after his role in the Raptors title. They also traded away a first-round pick and got back Dennis Schroeder from the Oklahoma City Thunder. I honestly couldn't have come up with a better player to add to this roster. Well, that's actually somewhat realistic. This is a guy that really deserved the Sixth Man of the Year award a season ago. The talent has been clear since he got to the league, but last season, everything just seemed to click. He was a huge reason the Thunder had such a surprisingly successful year. He averaged 19 points and 4 assists, shooting 46% from the field and 39% from three. While this team had some solid ball handlers like Rajon Rondo, LeBron James was really the only player who could consistently create for himself beyond the perimeter. A player like Dennis Schroeder is what this team truly needs, and the price they got him at, I would say, is an absolute steal. They then made a blockbuster signing, getting the reigning Sixth Man of the Year Montrezl Harrell from their main competitor in the Western Conference, the Los Angeles Clippers. They managed to sign him on a 2-year, $19 million deal. In the regular season, Harrell balled out, averaging 19 points and 7 rebounds, shooting 58% from the field, but it wasn't a beautiful season as a whole. This price might not have been attainable if he continued his success into the postseason. His 19 and 7 averages would go to just 10 and 3 in the playoff. This caused a massive change in perception of Harrell as a player, but there's a lot of reasons to be bullish on him going forward. First off, Harrell had to deal with some big roster changes going into the postseason with the addition of Marcus Morris, who was playing 30 minutes a game in the playoffs. But I think the biggest factor in his performance, and this really hasn't been talked about too much, was the unfortunate events he had to deal with off the court. He had to deal with the tragic loss of his grandmother, which would be hard to play with by itself, but this unique season he had to deal with really made things tough. He left the NBA bubble in Disney to be with his family, and when he returned, he was out of shape. This is a scenario we won't ever see Harrell deal with again, and we should fully expect him to impress in next year's playoffs, which is obviously important. This team is focused on much more than the regular season. This offseason was truly a front office masterpiece, and that was very evident with their next move. Despite a lot of Lakers fans' opinions on Danny Green, he was a valuable player to this roster. With him leaving in the deal for Schroeder, they went out and got his replacement for basically a fifth of the price with Wesley Matthews. They signed him to a 1-year, $3.6 million contract. Matthews is not bringing this team a vast offensive skill set, but that's not what the Lakers are bringing him in to do. He's a very solid three-point shooter, shooting 36% from three this past season and 38% across his 11-year career. He's also a very solid perimeter defender, so I'm not sure the loss of Danny Green will really even be felt. After this, I thought they were done, but then they went out and got former Defensive Player of the Year Marc Gasol, a player that's going to give them much needed three-point shooting from a position they got none of that from a year ago. They were also able to bring back both KCP and Markieff Morris. Now, they did lose some valuable guys like Rajon Rondo and Avery Bradley, but overall, this is by far the biggest winner of the offseason, and I don't think it's really even close. Real quick, I want to interrupt the video to talk about my Twitch channel. That'll be linked in the description below. I've been on there all the time, having a blast. If you want to see my face, that will be over there. I've been playing Warzone, 2K, a lot of times with some of your favorite content creators. So if you guys think that's interesting, go check that out in the link in the description below. Now, I don't think many teams came out of this offseason as losers, but in the effort to find one, we've got to talk about the Detroit Pistons. They started off the offseason by trading away their top player in Luke Kennard for the 19th pick in the draft, where they took Saddiq Bey. Now, most Pistons fans were pretty upset about this decision, but I didn't really mind it. Well, I didn't mind it if they were to make smart decisions for the rest of free agency. They started it off with a blockbuster signing of Mason Plumlee. They signed him to a 3-year, $25 million contract. I don't think I really need to explain why this is a questionable signing for a team that's going to be contending for the top odds at the #1 pick in next year's draft. They then decided they needed another Drummond replacement, getting the former 3rd overall pick in the draft, Jahlil Okafor. A cheap 2-year, $4 million deal, but just funny when you consider everything else they did. They then decided to dish out a huge contract to Jeremy Grant from the Denver Nuggets. They decided to give him a 3-year, $60 million deal. I like Jeremy Grant as a player, but man, that's a lot of money. Jeremy Grant is a great two-way stretch big in this league. This past season, he averaged 12 points, shooting 39% from 3 on a contending Denver Nuggets team. Now, those signings collectively are pretty bad, but I think what makes it worse is the fact that they didn't hold on to their breakout frontcourt player Christian Wood, who went on to the Rockets on a 3-year, $41 million deal. Now, I'm all for signing vets and trying to stay competitive, even when you're projected to be a #1 pick contender. But if that's what they wanted to do, I really think they would have been much better off sticking it out with both Christian Wood and Luke Kennard. I honestly really want to talk to the Pistons about what was going on in their head. The Miami Heat are another team that came out as flat out winners, not for any great additions or even getting better. They really might have even gotten worse, but they were able to keep their amazing books that make them such an intriguing contender going forward intact. The goal for them going into this offseason was to keep as much of their finals roster intact while having the most cap space possible going into the 2021 loaded free agency class. They held on to Goran Dragic, giving him a 2-year, $37 million deal, but the most important part of that contract is that there's a team option on the second season. They gave a similar deal to bring back Myers Leonard, a 2-year, $20 million deal with a team option. Now, they lost Jay Crowder, who got a 3-year deal with the Suns. They lost Derrick Jones Jr., who got the bag to go to Orlando. But with those contracts those players got, it would not have been smart for Miami to bring them back. But they did add both Avery Bradley and Mo Harkless. The Miami Heat are going to go into the 2021 offseason with Jimmy Butler locked up, Bam Adebayo as a restricted free agent, Tyler Hero still on his rookie deal, and enough money to sign just about anyone willing to come. Not a flashy offseason, but they are for sure winners. Another winner I have is the Portland Trailblazers. They started off the offseason by trading away Trevor Ariza, the 16th pick in the 2020 draft, and a conditional future first-round selection in exchange for Robert Covington. Covington struggled this past season, but he was put in one of the toughest positions we've ever seen. A 6'7" career small forward was traded to the Houston Rockets, who had adopted the smallest lineup in modern NBA history and decided he was going to be their starting center. Playing his natural position, Covington is one of the most versatile defenders in the whole league and an elite three-point shooter. Truly the most ideal role player you can ask for. As long as Damian Lillard is on that team, the Blazers are going to be a very interesting team in the West. They then were able to bring back Rodney Hood on a 2-year deal, bring back Carmelo Anthony on a 1-year deal. They then gave Derrick Jones Jr. a 2-year, $20 million contract. It's a lot of money for a guy that just averaged 8 points a game, but Jones Jr. is just 23 years old, so I really like the low-risk 2-year bet on a guy that could really be on the brink of a breakout season. Overall, I think the Blazers got much better without many resources to do so they walk away as winners. A team that I was undecided on for a while, but I'm really starting to lean towards flat-out losers, is the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, we would be saying quite the opposite if this Bogdanovic situation, really one of the most interesting situations we've seen in recent memory, actually worked out for them. Man, was it looking good. They made a blockbuster trade for Drew Holiday, then agreed to a sign and trade that would bring in Bogdanovic from the Sacramento Kings. As far as everyone knew, this was as official as it gets, like Woj official. But things changed quickly when it came out that Bogdanovic had not agreed to this, and the NBA actually began an investigation into the situation. Moral of the story, Bogdanovic is not coming to Milwaukee. And after this situation went down, it didn't get much better for the Bucks. Wesley Matthews left for Los Angeles. Robin Lopez went to Washington. I like their additions of Torrey Craig, Bryn Forbes, and Bobby Portis. But they also gave out some questionable contracts to both Pat Connaughton and DJ Augustine. Now they're in a situation where there's an insane amount of pressure on getting Giannis' signature on a new contract. I like the fit of Drew Holiday on this team, but I really thought the draft compensation was a gross overpay for his expiring deal. Now it grew on me, considering it looked like they were going to get Bogdanovic and maybe a long-term commitment out of Giannis, but things are starting to get ugly. We actually could see a scenario where both Giannis and Drew leave Milwaukee next offseason. Now, and the worst part of that scenario is they won't have control of their first-round selections from 2024 to 2027. I think they're losers as of right now. So the last of the winners I have is the Atlanta Hawks. As I'm recording this, the Kings can still match the Hawks' offer to Bogdanovic, but I have a feeling they won't. Now, even if they do, I still think the Hawks are winners, but I would knock them down a few notches. The Hawks started the offseason beautifully, getting probably the best big man prospect imaginable for this roster in Onyeka Okongwu. They then made a huge signing, bringing in Danilo Gallinari on a 3-year, $61 million deal. Now, this is a massive signing for Atlanta. We need to remember that Atlanta has really struggled to land in free agency, so it's going to be pretty rare that they're able to get a great deal, and that just is what it is. Now, I would have really loved this signing at 2 years, with Gallinari being 32 years old, but I still think he can bring a ton to this team. He honestly has just seemed to get better with age. Last year, he averaged 19 points and 5 rebounds as a 41% three-point shooter. Between DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish, and Gallo, this team's got a lot of options and a lot of flexibility at that small forward position. They then gave 28-year-old Bogdanovic a 4-year, $72 million deal. Now again, he's a restricted free agent with the Kings, and by the time you're seeing this, everything could have fallen through and they could have matched it, but if it doesn't, I really like it. The biggest hole for this Atlanta Hawks team going into the offseason was the point guard position. I had said it time and time again. Obviously, they had Trae Young, but I really felt they desperately needed more depth, and boy did they go out and get it. They signed Rajon Rondo to a 2-year, $15 million contract. Rondo is definitely not young, but this is a guy fresh off an NBA title who brings this team much needed ball handling, a veteran presence, and a guy that's going to show up if they do make the playoffs. They then went and got former top pick in the draft Chris Dunn on a 2-year, $10 million deal. This is a guy that doesn't bring much offense to the table, but has really emerged as one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, which obviously is going to come in hand with a Trae Young-led team. Overall, I'm extremely impressed with what the Hawks have been able to do in the past year. A season ago, this was a team of a young Trae Young, John Collins, and their 2 rookies, DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish. Now on paper, this team has some of the most depth in the Eastern Conference. At point guard, they've got Trae Young, Rajon Rondo, and Chris Dunn. At the shooting guard position, they've got Kevin Huerter and Bogdanovic, potentially. At the small forward position, they've got Gallinari, DeAndre Hunter, and Cam Reddish. In the front court, they've got John Collins, Clint Capella, and their rookie Onyeka Okongwu. I would be very excited right now to be a Hawks fan. Lastly, we've got a couple teams that aren't really winners or losers, but I felt the need to mention them. You've got the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are able to lock up Malik Beasley on a 4-year, $60 million deal, and man, do I love this. A lot of people look at this and see an overpay. I honestly see a really good deal. He only averaged 11 points a season ago, but when he was on Minnesota for 14 games, he averaged 21 points as a 42% three-point shooter on over 8 attempts a game. This is a guy that has proven himself as a 3-and-D player. And with what he did at the end of last season, man, am I excited about his potential on a team that looks ready to compete. Then we've got the Charlotte Hornets, who signed Gordon Hayward to a 4-year, $120 million contract. I know the Hornets just got their new top pick, LaMelo Ball, and it's not easy to bring in free agents to Charlotte, but man, this is both a massive time and money commitment. Hayward is closer to 31 than 30. He had a solid season a year ago, but is only probably going to get further and further away from the player we saw in his final years in Utah. I honestly don't want to give them a loss here just because of how hard that job looks of trying to bring in people to Charlotte, but I'm definitely not labeling them as winners. Lastly, I want to mention the Boston Celtics, who had a really interesting offseason, and I've got a lot of questions that I'm not sure we're going to get answers to. I like their signings of Tristan Thompson and Jeff Teague, but the big news surrounding them was this Gordon Hayward situation with the Indiana Pacers. Reportedly, Hayward wanted out of Boston and his preferred destination was Indiana, and that was only going to be possible with a sign and trade. Reports came out that Indiana was willing to part ways with both Doug McDermott and Miles Turner to bring in Hayward, but Danny Ainge was looking for one of Oladipo or TJ Warren with Turner. Now, we don't know how we got to the point where Hayward signed with Charlotte. It could have been that Hayward was thinking a price with Indiana, then Charlotte came to the table with this huge deal and he just couldn't refuse it. But if that's not how it happened, and Danny Ainge truly had the opportunity to make this deal with Indiana and he didn't, the Celtics are the biggest losers and it's not close at all. The Celtics needed help in the front court, and landing Turner would have been huge. He's one of the best shot blockers in the league, and also a very respectable stretch big. They then would have added one of the best three-point shooters in the league with Doug McDermott. They would have gone into the next season, adding a reliable center, depth, and a ton of three-point shooting. When you consider both the draft and free agency, they would have walked away as truly one of the biggest winners. Again, we don't really know how it all went down, and that's probably a good thing for the mind of Celtics fans. But these were just my thoughts. I want to know your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked the video, make sure you like and subscribe. And the shoutouts are gonna be Unknown, Julian, John, Henry, and Can't Stop Me. If you guys want to shout on the video, all you gotta do is like the video and comment like or rep notification squad, and I'll shout 5 you guys out. With all that being said, hope you guys have a great day, and peace.